This is lesson 4.2 about parallel lines. The goal is to use theorems to determine the relationship between the specific pairs of angles that we were studying last lesson. Those alternate interiors, alternate exteriors, correspondings, consecutives. So we're going to look today at the relationship between their angle measures, okay? So corresponding angle postulate. Well, this is the first thing we've got to have in place in order to find out any angle measures at all. If you remember corresponding angles from the last lesson, they're on the same corner of our intersection. Okay, so if you look here, angle 1 and angle 2 are corresponding, and this is our transversal right here, okay? So remember, this is like the upper right left-hand corner of each intersection, so they're really corresponding. They're on the same corner. So what this is telling us is if two lines, that's L and M, are crossed by a transversal, that's N, and if these two lines are parallel, right, then the corresponding angles are going to be congruent. They're going to be the same measure. Now, the if and only if statement tells me I can work this thing both directions. So not only if the lines are parallel are the angles congruent, but the converse is true. If the angles are congruent, then the lines must be parallel. So I can switch those two around. So this if and only if statement works in both ways. The conditional is true and the converse is true. Okay, so if this is 120 degrees, this is 120 degrees. All right? Okay, so that's corresponding angles are congruent. Now that can tell us something about every other angle pair. So let's think about this. If L and M are parallel and angle 1's 120, how many different measurements are there in the drawing? Well, we just talked about the fact that 1 and 2 are corresponding, so that angle is also 120. Now, what else do we see in the drawing? Well, hopefully you see the fact that there are vertical angles in the drawing. If this is 120, here's its vertical angle. It's also 120. If that's 120, then this vertical angle is 120. Okay? And then angles that form a straight line. Here's a pair of linear angles. This pair of angles is a linear pair. And we know linear pairs are supplementary or make 180. So 120 from 180 leaves me with 60. So that means every other angle in this figure is 60. So there are only two different measurements in the drawing. Okay? And the measures are either equal or they make 180. That's it. That's all we see in the figure. Okay, now that's only if the lines are parallel. That's what we're saying here. So, we were looking at line pairs like this last lesson, and those lines weren't necessarily parallel, therefore the angles aren't going to be equal. There's no relationship between the angle measures then. Okay, this is only if that pair of lines, L and M, are parallel. Okay, now to show parallel, might as well show you this while we're at it. I don't know why I picked the highlighter. There we go. Let's get rid of those. Parallel marks can be placed on lines to indicate that they're parallel, and they are just arrowheads like this. So somewhere on the lines themselves, you place those arrowheads, and it indicates that they are parallel to each other. Okay? All right, let's go on here and see what's going on. All right, angle relationships. So think about pairs of angles, picking one from each intersection. Which angle pairs are supplementary? So like angle 1 and angle, what? 1 from each intersection. Would it be 1 and 8 or 1 and 7? Well, 1's the obtuse angle, so it would match 8. 1 and 8 are congruent, so 1 and 7 have to make 180. And then angle 2 and angle 8 would be 180. Now go inside. Angle 3 and which one? Angle 5 or 6? Well, 3 and 5 would make 180. And 4 and 6 would make 180. Okay. So which angle pairs are congruent? 1 would be congruent to what? Angle 5 or angle 8. Angle 2 would be congruent to angle 7 or angle 6. Okay? So you can start to see some of those angle relationships forming. So then we can use the terminology we've been studying. Now, what's true about our angle pairs then? So again, if the lines are parallel, here's what we know. The corresponding angles, like 1 and 5. Alternate interior angles, like 3 and 6. Alternate exterior angles, like 2 and 7, are congruent pairs. The consecutive interiors, like 3 and 5, are supplementary. They make 180. Okay? So now our angle pairs that we've been discussing, that we studied last lesson, we now know that the relationship between them with parallel lines is that corresponding alternate interior and alternate exteriors are congruent, and the consecutive interiors are supplementary, or make 180. So we can use those facts now, okay? Well, how do we know it's true? So this particular proof I want to show you, I'll show you a couple of proofs here. So if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, well, that's M and N, and notice the parallel marks here. Then their alternate interior angles are congruent. So I'm going to number a pair of alternate interiors. Right here they are, 1 and 2. Okay? So why is that true based on what we know? Well, here's why. I'm going to name a third angle, this angle down here. What kind of angle pair? So let's see what we've been given here. What were we given? We were basically given that M was parallel to N. That's about all we know. Okay? We want to somehow prove that 1's congruent to 2. All right? Well, what's true about angle 1 and angle 3? Well, angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 by this corresponding angle postulate. If we don't have this postulate, none of this can be proven. So the corresponding angle postulate says that if two lines are parallel, their corresponding angles are congruent. So I can use the corresponding angle postulate right here. I can say this is true by the corresponding angle postulate. Well, what's true about 2 and 3? Well, 2 and 3 are congruent because they are vertical angles. And we know that vertical angles are congruent. Well, if 1 and 3 are congruent, and 2 and 3 are congruent, what's true about angle 1 and angle 2? They're congruent, and that's the transitive property. Okay? How about this one? You want to give it a try? See if you can do it? Then come back and see if you got it right. All right, this time they're giving me two parallel lines again. M's parallel to N. I'm going to number a pair of alternate exterior angles. I need to prove that 1 and 2 are congruent. Well, I'm going to go through the same process. I'm going to call this angle 3. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, and they are corresponding angles. So the corresponding angle postulate tells me they're congruent. And then angle 2 is congruent to angle 3 because vertical angles are congruent. And then it must be that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent by transitive. Okay? So how are we going to use these? What do we really need to know how to do? We need to know how to do problems like this right here. So HJ and KM are parallel, and angle MLI measures 116. So here's MLI right here. So this is 116. What's KLN? Nope, I marked the wrong one. There we go. Well, they're either equal or 180. Which is it? Well, they're vertical. So they're equal. Okay. That wasn't even one of our angle pairs. This time, QRU is 114. QRU 114. What is VUR? VUR is right here. Well, that pair is interior, and they are alternating, and we know that they are congruent. So this is also 114. Okay. Moving on. EG is parallel to HF or HJ. JIF, angle JIF. JIF, here it is, 111.4 degrees. How about EFD, this one? Well, are they going to be equal or 180? Well, these two are corresponding, and correspondings are equal. So these correspond, and they're equal, and these are a linear pair, so they make 180. So I got to do 180 minus 111.4, and that's 68.6. Okay. So you're just asking the same question. Equal or 180? So HIG is 47.6. Right, that's this angle here. What's KLN? That's this angle here. Well, what do you think? Equal or 180? Well, that's acute. That's obtuse. They can't be equal. They got to be 180. They're on the same side and they're exterior. Well, opposite, so like alternate exteriors are the same. So this one would be 47.6 because they're alternate exteriors, these two. And now you can see these two have to make 180. So I'm going to do 180 minus 47.6. So 132.4. Okay. All right. D4 asks you to do the same things. Just try and get a SMART score of 90.